For years, I've seen bakers online create cakes that look just like fuzzy shag rugs, and I think it's such a clever technique to do with frosting. And you know what else has frosting? Soap. What surprises me is that, to my knowledge, no soap maker has attempted this technique. Looking up shag rug soap on Google yields, well, recipes for how to clean your shag rug. I can understand why, because soap making is an expensive, hazardous, time-sensitive craft. That's why I'm gonna give it a go. I might fail, but if I don't, I think this shag rug soap would look really, really cool. I'm your bubble buddy Chris, and without further ado,
shall we shag now or shall we shag later?
Since shag came to prominence in the 60s, my soap is going to have a groovy drop swirl lava lamp design with colors inspired by the classic original lava lamps from that decade. The shag rug laid on top of the soap is going to have a 60s style color palette of canary, tangerine, chartreuse, azure, and ivory because the original names for colors are so 300 years ago. With the blueprint done, let's prep our colors. For my lava lamp, I'm going in with a half teaspoon of Neon House Party Purple for the lamp, and half a teaspoon of Neon Nuclear Orange powder for the lava, or lava if you're in the US. I moisten them with a bit of my oil blend, and then blendify with my swirly twirly until I see a cool triangle shape. The shag rug is getting a teaspoon of titanium dioxide and then a quarter teaspoon each of buttercup yellow, that neon nuclear orange again, neon yellow electric slide, neon bright green, which is going to join that neon yellow there, and finally neon blue disco pants. All of the colors I use for the soap have been sourced from Voyageur Soap and Candle, which is the local soap and candle shop where I get most of my supplies from. Those powders bathe in some hydrocarbons as well, right before the swirly twirly swirls and twirls. Our colors are all ready to go, which means it's time to make soap. Why can't I say that? I've prepared 177 grams of Skin Edie liquid, which I'll pour into my 411 grams of Skin Slimy liquid, and those two get blendified until they reach the consistency of cursed custard. In hindsight, I should have blended a bit less because my soap sort of started to run away from me, but we'll get to that. The fragrance I'm using for the soap is Ghost Train from Voyageur. It's a very warm, ambery, spicy patchouli fragrance, which actually brings me back to 1999 for some reason. It's like Halloween in a bottle, and given my vibrant purple-orange design, I think I've severely mismarketed the soap. It's a little Halloweeny. But when I did my research, patchouli kept popping up as a popular fragrance in the 60s, so I'm gonna stubbornly suck in my gut and pretend that people don't know what Halloween is. Despite being a friendly fragrance that doesn't really accelerate or anything, my batter is already too thick to do the nice drop swirl lava lamp design I was gonna try. I'm gonna divide the batter in half, which means 312 grams gets glooped into a separate container. My liquefied Kraft dinner cheese powder gets dumped into the lava part of my soap, and I give it a good mix. Now, that color, if heartburn were a color, this would be it. For some reason, I decided I wanted to blend it just to get it as thick as possible, so conducting a drop swirl would be impossible. Now that my lava soap is sufficiently thick, it's time to move on to the weird purple liquid. For those of you educated in color theory, I want you to put your hands down and let the others have a chance, okay? For the others, my batter is pretty yellow because I ran out of my normal olive oil and could not be bothered to make a trip to Superstore to get some. So I'm using a different brand that has a much deeper color, so my soap batter has been quite yellow lately. Unfortunately, purple and yellow are complementary colors, which means mixing them together will often give you a muddy grayish color. Fortunately, my purple was saturated enough to win the battle, but I still wanted it to be a bit more vibrant. I mixed up an unspecified amount of neon purple with a panicked amount of oil blend that I hastily borrowed from what I was gonna make my shag rug out of. Adding it to the batter did nothing. Like, zero difference. So there's an important lesson in futility in there somewhere. To assemble my lava lamp, I'm going to start with my purple and randomly plop in the orange blobs of lava. I would have preferred my batter to be a little thinner so I could get a proper drop swirl, but I only have myself to blame. What do you think, Judge Judy?
You're an idiot!
With my lava lamp filled to the brim, I'm gonna clean up the scene of the crime and level off the top for my shag rug. Speaking of which, I've got shag rug to make. Here's my Shag Rug oil blend that I borrowed from earlier, and I've added the titanium dioxide soup to it so I can get that white as dispersed as possible. If I don't use my stick blender for this, my soap is apt to get little white snowflakes when it's cut, as seen in this wintry soap I made where the effect was equally unintentional and serendipitous. My Shag Rug batter is a third the size of my lava lamp batch, which is a quarter the size of a full loaf of soap, so I'm working with very small quantities of liquid here. For my piping, I'm going to get this blended as much as I can before I divide it into all the pretty colors. And that's 35 grams of batter into each of my colors, by the way. Blending them up this way is a lot messier than you would imagine. You can't really see it very well on camera, but there were speckles of colored batter all over my table. And weirdly enough, it gave me a cool idea. What if I made soap paints and then painted on a white bar of soap or something? It sounds like a nightmare and it'll probably turn out really ugly, but it also sounds really fun. I've prepared little squares of plastic wrap that I'm going to use to wrap up each of my colors, and this is to keep the nozzle contamination to a minimum. I'm also just going to casually ignore the fact that this is not a very appropriate use for plastic wrap, because plastic wrap hurts the planet, so going forward it's better to use biodegradable or recyclable things that resemble plastic but aren't. I've prepared my piping bag with a grass-shaped piping tip from an obscure brand that I couldn't pronounce the name of. My little baggie of liquid rug gets tossed in there, and it's time to see if this is actually gonna work. Well, my soap has looked worse. I think I'm just gonna let the soap batter saponify a bit more so it can get nice and thick, because this consistency ain't slapping. Okay, I waited literally 30 minutes, pacing back and forth in my apartment, wearing goggles and gloves with all my blinds closed because I don't want people to look in and think I'm a weirdo. Newsflash, people already think I'm a weirdo, so what am I worried about? As you can see, the batter is pretty workable now and actually creates little spaghetti noodles when I pipe it. Does it look like shag? I'm not 100% on that, but I feel like this is a trust the process sort of thing. Next color is my yellow, and the way I'm arranging the pattern of colors is so that each bar of soap gets a bit of each color. I could do that by just piping straight rows of color, but why not pipe straight rows of color but turned 45 degrees? Every time I switch out a color, I get to squirt this really pretty shower of soap batter that transitions into the next hue, and if it weren't for my survival instincts, I'd probably lick it. The Shag Rug Technique, spoiler alert, I never mastered it. Nonetheless, my soap noodles actually held their form enough to sell the illusion that this is a shag rug. And hey, if you squint your eyes a bit, it kinda looks like the real thing. The tricky thing about soap frosting is it's such a weird consistency. You would think it would behave more like buttercream for a cake, but it's actually a lot more similar to a dense meringue. Now, I know it looks all soft and fluffy on camera, but I had to push hard to get the soap through those tiny little holes. My hands were quaking. It's also a bit of a wasteful technique. Earlier, I discussed using plastic wrap to separate the colors, which is wasteful in its own right, but transitioning between each color is literally watching money squirt into a lifeless pile. Overall, it's a technique that, while interesting, I shan't be using again for a while. But listen, if I ever do a Mike and Sully soap, why not? That groovy shag rug gets a nice spritzing of alcohol, the rubbing variety, and then goes away to sleep and saponify. 24 hours later, the soap is looking pretty darn impeccable. I was really worried about soda ash because these tiny soap noodles have exponentially more surface area to react with the air. But lo and behold, I keep my shag well vacuumed. whatever that means. This colorful little fuzzball is all the transition soap I squirted in between colors. It weighs 35 grams, which is about $1 worth of raw soap. If you're scaling up, you'll probably want to use separate reusable piping bags for each color to minimize your waste. What I will say is it does hold its own in a bathroom. Its presence, while disturbing, kinda slaps, and I feel tempted to leave it in there for a while just to confuse people. The big question on my mind is whether or not this soap is gonna resemble a lava lamp or some nondescript canvas of orange and purple smears. If it ends up being the latter, I'm gonna chalk that down to the fragrance misbehaving and definitely not me overblending my batter, because accepting responsibility is a full-time job that I am wholly unqualified for. Come on, lava lamp, lava lamp, lava lamp, lava lamp, lava lamp, lava lamp. You know, it's actually not a hot mess. It's a cold mess. It kind of looks like a lava lamp after you've turned it off and all the wax blobs sort of settle on the bottom. I think the top looks wonderful and it's fun to look at, but I have some comments to make about the soap I'll save for the product shots. For now, I gotta cut the rest. I was a little undecided with how I felt about this soap. The problem for me is I feel there's a disconnect between the Shag Rug and the lava lamp portions. That beautiful frosting is bright and light, and while the rest of the bar is dark, saturated warmth. I think using a color palette like this for the Shag Rug portion would have unified the two ideas more effectively. Speaking of Shag Rug, I don't really buy it. I think it looks beautiful and whimsical, and it reminds me of the meal of whipped colors in Hook, but I don't see Shag Rug. I'm not a piping soap through grass frosting tip connoisseur, so to blame this dilemma on anything but human error would be dumb. As a bar of soap on its own, I think much like great abstract art,
there's truth but no logic.
With those vibrant warm colors and that autumnal spicy patchouli fragrance, I think marketing this as a cuddly Halloween monster would be the way to go. But because I've already printed and cut out the labels, I'm forcing an identity upon this bar of soap, and it will be known as the Swinger's Pad. Groovy, baby. What do you think? Do you get 60s or do you get fuzzy monster hiding under the bed? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, with the label hiding 60% of the soap, it kind of does look 60% 60s. With this interesting enigma of a soap complete and ready for the shelf, that was a soap journey with the Soap Universe. Thank you for watching. Bubble bye.